Hey guys, welcome back. Let's take a look at Luke's Gospel here, the very first chapter. Luke is different than the other Gospels in that it starts off by telling us that it's a letter. It's a letter that whoever the author is writing to somebody named Theophilus. So, unlike the Old Testament where it says, this is what Isaiah saw and heard during the reigns of King Ahaz and Hezekiah. Okay, they introduce themselves. They take credit for their work. How do we know who wrote the Torah? How do we know it was Moses? Because it says that Moses wrote these things down. Okay? Anyway, the New Testament, there's no transparency whatsoever, and people attribute the names of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to the authors, even though nobody knows who wrote them. Now, this story goes on to tell us that it's during the time of King Herod of Judea. And the characters they introduce here are Elizabeth, which is the Virgin Mary's cousin, and her and her husband Zechariah, who is a priest. They were righteous in the sight of God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and decrees of the Lord. Okay? Let's stop right there for a minute. How would Paul feel about that? That somebody was able to follow all the commandments? Well, Paul would disagree with Luke because Paul says in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But Luke chapter 1, verse 7 tells us that Zechariah and Elizabeth had no children and they were old, okay? So, long story short, an angel comes along and says, hey, I know you're old and you can't have kids, but you're going to have a child. Okay, this is just a ripoff from the stories from the Old Testament. We find in Genesis that Rachel cannot conceive, and then God opens up her womb, right? And we see that again in the book of Samuel in the beginning there. Hannah is unable to conceive, and then they pray, and then the Lord opens up her womb, okay? That's what it says. And I guess the biggest takeaway from this is that whenever you see somebody giving birth in the Bible, it's always because they had sex, okay, hot, steaming sex. And the Bible wants you to know that, and that's why it points that out every time. It doesn't say so-and-so had a baby. It says they had sex, and then the child was born. Why? It's to completely differentiate themselves from the pagan world. Okay, because the pagans believed in virgin births and gods having sons through people and everything. And God says all throughout the Tanakh not to believe or do any of this stupid nonsense, because it's stupid. Remember that no virgins ever give birth in the Old Testament. So back to Luke chapter 1, the angel appears to Zechariah and says that he's going to open up Elizabeth's womb, and they have a child, right? So Elizabeth becomes pregnant and she gives birth to John the Baptist. All right? So, and then it says in verse 17, he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous. Now, let's stop right there. They're getting this from the last book of prophecy, Malachi, and it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that Elijah will appear in the spirit. Behold, this is verse 5, Malachi 4, verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. It doesn't say, I will send some other guy in the spirit of this person. It says he will send Elijah. Okay, so we're twisting the words of the Bible around here. Now, in Matthew's Gospel, we're not told the name of the angel that comes down, but we are in Luke. And lo and behold, guess who it is? Chapter 1, verse 19, the angel says, I am Gabriel. And I guess we have to assume that it's the same Gabriel from the book of Daniel, right? Unless there's two angels named Gabriel, I highly doubt it. So now if you're Jewish and you understand the Bible and you've made it past the nonsense of Luke 1 verse 17, just wait till you get up a few verses after this. The angel Gabriel appears to Mary. Now we're not given this name in the Gospel of Matthew, of course, but here we are. And how do they know it's Gabriel? You know, anybody could say they're Gabriel or Fred or Joe, and you wouldn't have any way to differentiate. This angel Gabriel comes and says to Mary, oh, you're going to have a child, it's going to be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High, even though he isn't. and he will take the throne of David and reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom will never end. And then all the music stops, and the camera pans into Mary's face close up, and she says, "But how can this be? I'm a virgin." And everybody laughs. Okay, because that's how it would look in a movie, right? Because we know that virgins never give birth in the Old Testament, because that's something God says is abhorrent, it's nonsense. Don't do it, don't think about it, don't be like them. And this is the crux of Luke's story here. Not even past the first chapter here, and they make it just completely unbelievable.